Yep, looks like it is time. I'm going to put my channel here, the link at least in my own cord. Oh, no echo. I'm going to make sure I tell myself so we don't get the echo going on. But yeah, apparently reading chapters 2 and 3 of The Stranger by Camus was more popular than I would expect. So I figured let's keep going with it. I don't know who the hell's watching me. I don't know why. It's kind of funny to me. Pokemon card, Yankee space YouTuber. I like Darkrai and Judge. Derp. Speaking of, like I said in the about section, Void needs to do a little dusting around the cave. Uh, Oddball pieces of my collection. Now that could be Pokemon, that could be sports. You know me. It could be a Pez dispenser. Could be a Transformer figurine. I don't know. Help me out, Gengar. He's a plushie. He doesn't say anything. But this was sent to me, and apparently there are only like 6 different variations. I've looked up these, and I found that they are real. This isn't somebody's fan-made crap. They're not Funkos. They're Focos. Foco. So they're not Funko Pops. They look more like the top of a totem pole. And here is an absolutely horrifying looking Aaron Judge. And as you can see, the gap in the teeth. It's a very early Aaron Judge because he didn't have it fixed. And this is the only one who had his actual name. Everything else on the back, as you can see, is numbered with some weird ass combination of letters and numbering. But this is official MLB merchandise somehow. It was a gift. I will forever treasure it. Trust me. It has been in display for a long time next to a lot of other team captains. Of course, I'm talking about a lot of team captains. You know, there's Mantle, there's Judge over here, there's Jeter, there's Mattingly. You know me. Let's get to chapter 4 because I think I've given everybody enough time to actually hit the link that's going to get here. I worked hard all week. Raymond stopped by and told me he'd sent the letter. I went to the movies twice with Emmanuel, who doesn't always understand what's going on the screen. So you have to explain things to him. Yesterday was Saturday, and Marie came over, and as we'd planned, I wanted her so bad when I saw her in that pretty red and white striped dress and leather sandals. You could make out the shape of her firm breasts, and her tan made her face look like a flower. We caught a bus and went a few kilometers outside Algiers to a beach with rocks on either end, bordered by shore grass on the land side. The 4 o'clock sun wasn't too hot, but the water was warm, with slow, gently lapping waves. Marie taught me a game. As you swam, you had to skim the foam off of the crest of the waves with your mouth, hold it there, and roll over on your back and spit it out toward the sky. This made a delicate froth which disappeared into the air or fell back into a warm spray over my face. But after a while, my mouth was stinging with a salty bitterness. Then Marie swam over to me and pressed herself against me in the water. She put her lips on mine. Her tongue cooled my lips when we tumbled in the waves for a moment. When we'd gotten dressed again on the beach, see how he just skipped over the rest of the, yeah, you get what's going on. Okay, anyway. We got dressed again on the beach. Marie looked at me with her eyes sparkling. I kissed her. We didn't say anything more from that point on. I held her to me and we hurried to catch a bus, get back, go to my place, and throw ourselves onto my bed. I left my window open. The summer night air flowing over our brown bodies felt good. The morning Marie stayed out and I told her that we would have lunch together. I went downstairs to buy some meat. On my way back upstairs, I heard a woman's voice in Raymond's room. A little later, old Salamano growled at his dog. We heard the sounds of footsteps and claws on the wooden stairs, and then lousy, stinking bastard. And they went down into the street. I told Marie all about the old man, and she laughed. She was wearing a pair of my pajamas with the sleeves rolled up. When she laughed, I wanted her again. A minute later, she asked me if I loved her. I told her it didn't matter or anything, but that I didn't think so. She looked sad. But as we were fixing lunch, and for no apparent reason, she laughed in such a way that I kissed her. It was then that we heard the sound like a fight break out in Raymond's room. First, we heard a woman's shrill voice, and then Raymond saying, "You used me! You used me! I'll teach you, you use me!" Then there were some thuds, and the woman screamed in such a terrifying way that the landing immediately filled with people. Marie and I went to see, too. The woman was standing shrieking, and Raymond was still hitting her. Marie said it was terrible. I didn't say anything. She asked me to go find a policeman, but I told her I didn't like cops. One showed up anyway with the tenant from the third floor who was a plumber. The cop knocked on the door and couldn't hear anything anymore. He knocked harder, and after a minute, the woman started crying, and Raymond opened the door. He had a cigarette in his mouth and an innocent look on his face. The girl rushed to the door and told the policeman that Raymond had hit her. "What's your name?" the cop said. Raymond told him. "Take that cigarette out of your mouth when you're talking to me," the cop said. Raymond hesitated, looked at me, took a drag on his cigarette. Right then, the cop slapped him, a thick, heavy smack right across the face. The cigarette went flying across the landing. The look on Raymond's face changed, but he didn't say anything for a minute. Then he asked in a meek voice if he could pick up his cigarette. The cop said, "Go ahead," and added, "Next time you'll know better than to clown around with a policeman." Sounds like America. It's not much different. "Thank you, cameras. Thank you, cell phone cameras." Meanwhile, the girl was crying and she repeated, "He beat me up. He's a pimp. Officer." Raymond asked, "Is that legal, calling a man a pimp like that?" But the cop ordered him to shut his trap. Then Raymond turned to the girl and said, "You just wait, sweetheart. We're not through yet." The cop told him to knock it off and said the girl was to go, and he was to stay in his room and wait to be summoned to the police station. He also said that Raymond ought to be ashamed to be so drunk that he'd have the shakes like that. Then Raymond explained, "I'm not drunk, officer. It's just that I'm here and you're there and I'm shaking. I can't help it." He shut the door and everybody went away. Marie and I finished fixing lunch. This is all before lunch, good God. But she wasn't hungry. I ate almost everything. She left at 1 o'clock and I slept a while. Around 3 o'clock, there was a knock on my door and Raymond came in. I didn't get up. He sat down on the edge of my bed. He didn't say anything for a minute, and I asked him how it all had gone. He told me that he'd done what he wanted to do, but that she'd slapped him, and so he'd beaten her up. I'd seen the rest. I told him it seemed to me that she'd gotten her punishment now and ought to be happy. He thought so too, and he pointed out that the cop could do anything he wanted. It wouldn't change the fact that she'd gotten her beating. He added then that he knew all about cops and how to handle them. Then he asked if I had expected him to hit the cop back. Here's where I have something underlined, which means this is a sentence that was important to me through the first time reading this, as it's in pencil. I said I wasn't expecting anything, and besides, I don't like cops. Raymond seemed pretty happy. He asked me if I wanted to go for a walk with him. It's just the oppositional defiance. Like, if you don't like authority, there's usually a reason. You've usually been screwed over by figures in authority over you. ODD does not exist outside of abuse. No one just wakes up and hates a cop the minute they're born. It's just nobody hates a priest just because they went to church one time, unless that was a really bad service. It have to be pretty bad, but they're usually boring. That's fine. Boring is great. Keep your religion boring. I like it that way. It's when you get all zealous that shit goes wrong. I got up and started combing my hair. He told me that I'd have to act as a witness for him. That didn't matter to me, but I didn't know what I was supposed to say. According to Raymond, all I had to do was state that a girl had cheated on him. I agreed to act as a witness for him. We went out, and Raymond bought me a brandy. Then we wanted to shoot a game of pool, and I just barely lost. Afterwards, he wanted to go to a whorehouse, but I said no, because I don't like that. So we took our time getting back, him telling me how glad he was that he'd been able to give the woman what she deserved. God, what a prick. I found him to be very friendly with me, and thought it was a nice moment. You gotta choose how you define your moments. Was this man a beater of women? Yes. Was the moment pleasant? No. Was Bill Cosby talented? Sadly, yes. Everything else so true about him? Yeah. Did he do it? I don't know. Did he? Yeah, did he? Why? From a distance, I noticed. Oh, wait. Up yet. From a distance, I noticed old Solomon was standing on the doorstep. He looked flustered. When I got closer, I saw that he didn't have his dog. He was looking all over the place, turning around, peering into the darkness of the entry, muttering incoherently, and then he started searching the street again with his little red eyes. When Raymond asked him what was wrong, he didn't answer right away. I barely heard him mumble, "Stinking bastard." And he went on fidgeting around. I asked him where his dog was. He snapped at me and said he was gone. And all of a sudden, the words came pouring out. "I took him to the parade ground, like always. There were lots of people around the booths at the fair. I stopped to watch the king of the escape artists. And then when I was ready to go, he wasn't there. Sure, I've been meaning to get him a smaller collar for a long time, but I don't even think the bastard would take off like that." And Raymond pointed out to him that the dog might have gotten lost and he'd come back. He gave examples of dogs that had walked dozens of kilometers to get back to their masters. Nevertheless, the old man looked even more flustered. "But they'll take him away from me, don't you see? If only somebody would take him in. But that's impossible. Everybody's disgusted by his scabs. The police won't get him for sure." So I told him he should go to the pound and they'd give him the dog back after he paid a fee. He asked me if it was a big fee. I didn't know, and he got mad. "Pay money for that bastard? Ah, you can damn well die." And he started cursing the dog. Raymond laughed and went inside. I followed him and parted upstairs on the landing. A minute later, I heard the old man's footsteps, and he knocked on my door. When I opened it, he stood in the doorway for a minute and said, "Excuse me, excuse me." I asked him to come in, but he refused. He was looking at me at the tips of his shoes, and his scabby hands were trembling. Without looking up at me, he asked, "They're not going to take him away from me, are they, Monsieur Marcel? They'll give him back to me. Otherwise, what's going to happen to me? This man who hates his old scabby-ass dog, he is the scabby-ass dog. And he's lost." And his dog finally said, "Screw it," after all this abuse and all the self-abuse this man has done to himself, Salamano. Now, these are the points of absurdism where you really see through the veil of what a human being really is, who they truly are, what they truly want, and what they truly do. That's what it did. I told them that the pound kept dogs for 3 days so that their owners could come and claim them, and after that, they did with them as they saw fit. He looked at me in silence, and he said good night. He shut his door, and I heard him pacing back and forth. His bed creaked, and from a peculiar little noise coming through the partition, I realized he was crying. For some reason, I thought of Maman, but I had to get up early the next morning. I wasn't hungry. I went to bed without any dinner. That was chapter 4. No one's here, but here's chapter 5 because I'm some sort of sick masochist. Raymond called me at the office. He told me that a friend of his, he'd spoken to me about him, had invited me to spend the day Sunday at a little beach house near Algiers. I said I'd really like to, but I promised to spend the day with a girlfriend. Raymond immediately told me that she was invited too. His wife's friend would be glad to not be alone with a bunch of men. Well, gotta let the ladies have a little time alone, eh? Wanted to hang up right away because I know the boss doesn't like me calling us from town. But Raymond asked me to hang on and told me that he could have passed the invitation that evening, but he had something else to tell me. He'd been followed all day by a group of Arabs, one of whom was a brother of his former mistress. "If you see him hanging around the building when you get home this evening, let me know." I said I would. A little later, my boss sent for me. For a second, I was annoyed because I thought he was going to tell me to do less talking on the phone, do more work. But that wasn't it at all. He told me he wanted to talk to me about a plan of him that was still pretty vague. He just wanted to have my opinion on the matter. He was planning to open an office in Paris, which would handle his business directly from a big company. He's on the spot, and he wanted to know how I felt about going there. I'd be able to live in Paris and travel around for part of the year as well. "You're young, and it seems to me it's the kind of life that would appeal to you." I said yes, but it was really all the same to me. Another underlined sentence. I said yes, but that it was really all the same to me. Algiers, Paris, LA, New York, out in the middle of Alabama and the sticks. It's all the same. Then he asked me if I was interested in a change of life. Once again, it's all the same. I said that people never change their lives, and in any case, one life was as good as another, and that I wasn't dissatisfied with mine here at all. He looked upset and told me that I never gave him a straight answer, that I had no ambition, and that was a disastrous in business. So I went back to work. I would have rather have not upset him, but I couldn't see any reason to change my life. Looking back on, I wasn't unhappy. When I was a student, I had lots of ambitions like that. But when had to give up my studies, I learned very quickly that none of it really mattered. I used to be a musician, you guys know. I used to act. Oh, that evening Marie came by. This whole paragraph almost is bracketed, not underlined. So at one point in time, this must have been incredibly important to me in chapter 5. That evening, this might remind me of my first fiance. That might be why, because I've always, with this book, Marie always reminds me of the biggest lie I ever told. That lasted, what, 6 years? The evening Marie came by to see me and asked me if I wanted to marry her. I was the one that asked in my case. I said it didn't make any difference to me and that we could if she wanted to. And she wanted to know if I loved her. I answered the same way I had last time, that it didn't mean anything, but that I probably didn't love her. So why marry me then? She said. I explained to her that it didn't really matter and that if she wanted to, we could get married. Besides, she was the one that was doing the asking, and all I was saying was yes. Thank you. Yep. All right, Kitty. Well, we're in chapter 5, and I'll just repeat that last. There's a reason this explains a lot about me. I'll go back to the beginning of this chapter, buddy. I'm going to say your real name in here. I'm not doxing people, but Daddy-O, I got you. That evening, Marie, his love interest, the woman who has his eye, should I say. That evening, Marie came by to see me and asked me if I wanted to marry her. I said it didn't make any difference to me and that we could if she wanted to. Then she wanted to know if I loved her. I answered the same way I had last time, that it didn't mean anything, but that I probably didn't love her. So why marry me then? She said. I explained to her that it really didn't matter and that if she wanted to, we could get married. Besides, she was the one doing the asking, and all I was doing was saying yes. Then she pointed out that marriage was a serious thing. I said no. She stopped talking for a minute and looked at me without saying anything. Then she spoke. She just wanted to know if I would have accepted the same proposal from another woman with whom I was involved in the same way. Someone he was sleeping with. Just put it that way. I said, sure. Then she said she wondered if she loved me, and there was no way I could know about that. After another moment's silence, here's an underlined sentence, so possibly meant something to me last time I read this. She mumbled that I was peculiar, that was probably why she loved me, but that one day I might hate her for the same reason. Looking at you, ex-fiance. Yeah, love can turn to hate real fast. Well, was it 6 2/3 years? It usually is for me. I never get to the 7-year itch. Guess that's why, retired. I didn't say anything because I didn't have anything to add. So she took me by the arm with a smile and said she wanted to marry me. After all that, she wanted to marry me. I said we could do it whenever she wanted. Then I told her about my boss's proposition, and she said she'd love to see Paris. I told her that I'd lived there once, and she asked me what it was like. I said it's dirty. Lots of pigeons, dark courtyards, everybody's pale. Shut up. Then we went for a walk through the main streets to the other end of town. The women were beautiful, and I asked Marie if she'd noticed. Not the smartest man on the planet. The women were beautiful, and I asked Marie if she'd noticed. She said yes, and that she understood what I meant. Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. I get it, they're hot. For a while, neither of us said anything, but I wanted her to stay with me. I told her we could have dinner together at Celeste. She would have liked to, but she had something to do. We were near my place, and I said goodbye to her. She looked at me. Don't you want to know what I have to do? I did, but I hadn't thought to ask, and she seemed to be scolding me. Then, seeing me so confused, she laughed again. Mm-hmm. And moved toward me with her whole body to offer me her lips. I had dinner at Celeste's. I already started eating when a strange little woman came in and asked me if she could sit at my table. Of course she could. Her gestures were jerky, and she had bright eyes and a little face like an apple. She took off her jacket, sat down, and studied the menu feverishly. She called Celeste over and ordered her whole meal all at once, in a voice that was clear and very fast at the same time. While she was waiting for her first course, she opened her bag, took out a slip of paper and a pencil, added up the bill in advance, took the exact amount plus tip out of her vest pocket, set it down on the table in front of her. At that point, the waiter brought her first course, and she gulped it down. While waiting for the next course, she again took out her bag, a blue pencil, and a magazine that listed the radio programs for the week. One by one, and with great care, she checked off almost every program. Since the magazine was about a dozen pages long, she meticulously continued this task throughout the meal. Pardon. I had already finished, and she was still checking away with the same zeal. Then she stood up, put her jacket on with the same robot like movements, and left. I didn't have anything to do, so I left too and followed her for a while. She had positioned herself right next to the curb and was making her way with incredible speed and assurance, never once swerving or looking around. I eventually lost sight of her and turned back. I thought about how peculiar she was, but forgot about her a few minutes later. Once again, I found an old Salamano waiting outside my door. I asked him if he had, and he told me that his dog was lost because it wasn't at the pound. The people who worked there had told him maybe it had been run over. I asked if he could find out at the police station. They told him that they didn't keep track of things like that because they happen every day. Death happens every day. That's the way this book starts. Preparation for a fucking funeral. That's the way the book starts. Yeah, this is marked as not for children, so my commentary may not be for children. Deal with it. This is a book that means a lot to me. It won a Pulitzer Prize. Shut it. I told old Salamano he could get another dog, but he was right to point out to me that he was used to this one. I was sitting cross-legged on the bed, and Salamano had sat down on the chair in front of me. He was facing me and both hands on his knees. He had kept his old felt hat on. He was mumbling bits and pieces of sentence through his yellowing mustache. He was getting on my nerves a little, but I didn't have anything to do. I didn't feel sleepy. Just for something to say, I asked him about his dog. He told me he had got him after his wife died. Plot point. He had married fairly late. When he was young, he wanted to get into the theater. In the army, he used to act in military vaudevilles. But he had ended up working in the railroads. He didn't regret it because he was one very young. He had to feed it from a bottle. But since a dog doesn't live as long as a man, they ended up being old together. He was bad-tempered, Salamano said. We have a run-in every now and again. But he was a good dog just the same. He said he was well-bred. And Salamano looked pleased. And you didn't know about him before he got sick. His coat was the best thing about him. Every night, every morning after the dog had gotten that skin disease, Salamano rubbed him with ointment. But according to him, the dog's real sickness was old age. There's no cure for old age. At that point, I yawned, and the old man said he'd be going. I told him that he could stay, and that I was sorry about what had happened to his dog. He thanked me. He told me that Maman was very fond of his dog. He called her your poor mother. He said he supposed I must be very sad since Maman died, and I didn't say anything. Then he said very quickly, with an embarrassed look, that he realized that some people in the neighborhood thought badly of me for having sent Maman to a home. But he knew me and knew I loved her very much. I still don't know why, but I said that until then I hadn't realized that people thought badly of me for doing it, but that the home had seemed like the natural thing since I didn't have enough money to have Maman cared for. Anyway, I added, it had been a long time since she had anything to say to me, and she was bored all by herself. Yes, he said, and at least in a home you can make a few friends. And he said good night. You have to remember, Salamano is old. He could be in a home himself. And his dog is gone. That scabby, nasty bastard of a dog is gone. Salamano has lost his purpose. He's lost his reason, his raison d'etre. Okay, I know a little French. Right? A little. Un poquito. That's Spanish. Un peu. Happy. Then he said goodnight. He wanted to sleep. His life had changed now, and he wasn't so sure about what he was going to do. But for the first time since I'd known him, and with a furtive gesture, he offered me his hand, and I felt the scales on his skin. He gave me a little smile, and before he left, he said, I hope the dogs don't bark tonight. I always think it's mine. Chapter 6 is short, so we're going to do it because, fuck it, we'll do it live. Camus, you were a genius. One of the best books ever written. I had a hard time waking up on Sunday, always on Sunday. And Marie had called me and shake me. We didn't eat anything because we wanted to go to the beach early. I felt completely drained and I had a slight headache. My cigarette tasted bitter. Marie made fun of me because she said I had on a funeral face. I'd been to his mother's funeral like 3 days before this. You guys understand this book doesn't take place over more than a span of like a week and a half. No, 2 weeks. It's like a 2 week span. This is a fortnight long. And no, there's no skin for it. Ugh. I told her she was beautiful, and she laughed with delight. On our way downstairs, we knocked on Raymond's door. He told us he'd be right down. Once out in the street, because I was so tired, and and also because we hadn't opened the blinds, the day, already bright with sun, hit me like a slap in the face. Marie was jumping with joy and kept on saying what a beautiful day it was. I felt a little better, and I noticed that I was hungry. I told Marie, who pointed to her oilcloth bag where she had put our bathing suits and a towel. I just had to wait. Then we heard Raymond shutting his door. He had on a blue trousers and white short sleeve shirt, but he'd put on a straw hat, which made Marie laugh, and his forearms were all white under the black hairs. I found it a little repulsive. He was whistling as he came down the stairs and seemed very cheerful. He said, "Good morning, old man," to me, and called Marie Mademoiselle. The day before, we'd gone to the police station, and I testified that the girl had cheated on Raymond. He'd gotten off with a warning. This is the 50s. It's not even in America. It's in the Algiers. Don't me too me for reading a book. They didn't check out my statement. Once again, the 50s. Outside the front door, we talked about it with Raymond, and then we decided to take the bus. The beach wasn't very far, but we'd get there sooner that way. Raymond thought his friend would be glad to just see us get there early. We were just about to leave when all of a sudden Raymond motioned to me to look across the street. I saw a group of Arabs leaning against the front of a tobacconist's shop. They were staring at us in silence, but in that way of theirs, as if they were nothing but stones or dead trees. Raymond told me that the second one from the left was his man, and he seemed worried. But he added it was all settled now. Marie didn't really understand and asked us what was wrong. I told her that they were Arabs who had it in for Raymond. She wanted to get going right away. Raymond drew himself up and laughed, saying, "We'd better step on it." This is where, okay, this is the end of part one. We're getting there. Okay, we found the Arab. So all of you who listened to the Cure song looking for clues about this book, who didn't take the hour or two it takes to read this book by yourself without emphasis on the right syllables, uh, check it out. It's a book. People read these things sometimes. We headed toward the bus stop, which wasn't far. Raymond said that the Arabs weren't following us. I turned around. They were still in the same place, and they were looking in the same indifference at the stop we'd just been standing. We caught the bus. Raymond, who seemed very relieved, kept on cracking jokes for Marie. I could tell he liked her, but she hardly said anything to him. Every once in a while, she'd look at him and laugh. We got off in the outskirts of Algiers. Thank you for the hearts, whoever sent those. That's nice of you. The beach wasn't far from the bus stop, but we had to cross a small plateau which overlooks the sea and then drops steeply down to the beach. It was covered with yellowish rocks and whitish asphodels set against the already hard blue of the sky. Marie was having fun scattering the petals, taking big swipes at them with her oilcloth bag. We walked between the rows of small houses behind green or white fences, some with their verandas hidden behind the tamarisks, others standing naked among the rocks. Before we reached the edge of the plateau, we could already see the motionless sea, and farther out, a massive, drowsy-looking promontory in the clear water. The faint hum of a motor rose up to us in the still air. Way off, we saw a tiny trawler moving almost imperceptibly across the dazzling sea. Marie gathered some rock irises. From the slope leading down to the beach, we could see that there were already some people swimming. Raymond's friend lived in a little wooden bungalow at the far end of the beach. The back of the house rested up against the rocks, and the pilings that held it up in front went straight down into the water. Raymond introduced us. His friend's name was Masson. He was a big guy, very tall, broad-shouldered, with a plump, sweet little wife with a Parisian accent. Right off, he told us to make ourselves at home and said that his wife had just fried up some fish he'd caught this morning. I told him how nice I thought his house was, and he told me that he spent Saturdays and Sundays and all his days off there with my wife, of course, he added. Just then his wife was laughing with Marie. For the first time, maybe, I really thought I was going to get married. Like I said, I relate to this book so much that it's almost sickening to the point that it's like, did I dream this book, or was this written for me? And the older I get, the more true it becomes. It's horrifying. God, life's a mystery. My son wanted to go for a swim, but his wife and Raymond didn't want to come. The three of us went down to the beach, and Marie jumped right in. My son and I waited a little. He spoke slowly, and I noticed that he had a habit of finishing everything he said with, and I'd even say, when really it didn't add anything to the meaning of his sentence. Referring to Marie, he'd say, "She's stunning," and I'd even say, "Charming." After that, I didn't pay any more attention to his mannerisms of his because I was absorbed by the feeling that of the sun was doing me a lot of good. Ugh. Okay, that I can't relate to. Ugh. The sand was starting to get hot underfoot. I held back the urge to get into the water for a minute longer, but finally I said to my son, "Shall we?" I dove in. We waded in slowly and started swimming a while, only when he couldn't touch the bottom anymore. He did the breaststroke, and not too well either. So I left him and joined Marie. The water was cold, and I was glad to be swimming together again. Marie and I swam out a ways, and we felt closeness as we moved in unison, and were very happy. Thank you, Adversity. I don't know what's amazing, but thanks. Out in our deeper water, we floated on our backs, and the sun on my upturned face was drying the last of the water trickling out of my mouth. I remember the game they were playing where the sea foam spraying it into the air. We saw Masson making his way back to the beach to stretch out in the sun. From far away, he looked huge. Marie wanted us to swim together. I got behind her and told her around, and held her around the waist. She used her arm to move us forward, and I did the kicking. The little splashing sound followed us through the morning air until I got tired. I left Marie and headed back, swimming smoothly and breathing easily. On the beach, I stretched out on my stomach along the sun and put my face on the sand. I said it was nice. He agreed. Soon afterward, Marie came back. I rolled over to watch her coming. She was glistening all over with salty water and holding her hair back. She lay down right next to me, and the combined warmth from her body and from the sun made me doze off. Marie shook me and told me that my son had gone back up to the house, that it was time for lunch. I got right up away because I was hungry, but Marie told me I hadn't kissed her since that morning. It was true, and yet I wanted to. "Come into the water," she said. We ran and threw ourselves into the first little wave. We swam a few strokes, and she reached out and held on to me. I felt her legs wrapped around mine, and I wanted her. When we got back, my son was already calling us. I said I was starving. Then, out of the blue, he was announced to his wife and that he liked me. The bread was good. I devoured my share of the fish, and that there was some meat and fried potatoes. We all ate without talking. My son drank a lot of wine and kept filling my glass. By the time the coffee came, my head felt heavy, and I smoked a lot. My son, Raymond, and I talked about spending August together on the beach, sharing the expenses. Suddenly, Marie said, "Do you know what time it is?" "It's only 11:30." We were all surprised, but Masson said that we had eaten very earlier, and that was only natural because lunchtime was whenever you were hungry. But for some reason, that made Marie laugh. I think she had had a little too much drink. "It's noon. How much wine have you had?" I mean, not that I'm one to speak, but come on. Ah, the French. Petit déjeuner comes with a little bit of, vin. Sorry, crossing out my languages again. Okay. Marie said she would stay and help Madame Masson with the dishes. The little Parisienne said first they'd have to get rid of the men. Then the three of us went down to the beach. The sun was shining almost directly overhead onto the sand, and the glare on the water was unbearable. There was no one left on the beach. From inside the bungalows bordering the plateau and jutting out over the water, we could hear the rattling of plates and silverware. It was hard to breathe in the rocky heat rising from the ground. At first, Raymond and Masson discussed people, things I didn't know what about. I gathered they'd known each other for a long time and had even lived together at one point. We head down to the beach, to the sea, and walked along the water's edge. Now and then a little wave would come up higher than any others and wet our canvas shoes. I wasn't thinking about anything because I was half asleep from the sun beating down on my bare head. At that point, Raymond said something to Masson which I didn't quite catch, but at the time I noticed. At the far end of the beach, here's where it comes, baby. The far end of the beach, and a long way from us, two Arabs in blue overalls coming in our direction. I looked at Raymond and he said, "It's him." We kept walking. Masson asked how they'd managed to follow us all this way. I thought they must have seen us getting on the bus with a beach bag. I didn't say anything. The Arabs were walking slowly, but they were already much closer. We didn't change our pace, but Raymond said, "If there's any trouble, Masson, you take care of the other one. I'll take care of my man. Masson, if another one shows up, he's yours." I said, "Yes." And Masson put his hands in his pocket. The blazing sand looked red to me now. We moved steadily toward the Arabs. The distance between us was getting shorter and shorter. When we were just a few steps away from each other, the Arabs stopped. Masson and I slowed down. Raymond went right up to his man. I couldn't hear what he said to him, but the other guy made a move as though he were about to going to butt him. Then Raymond struck the first blow and called Masson right away. Masson went for the one that had been pointed out as his and hit him twice as hard as he could. The Arab fell flat in the water, face down, and lay there for several seconds with bubbles bursting out of the surface around his head. Meanwhile, Raymond had landed one too, and the other Arab's face was bleeding. This is where things get a little dicey. Raymond turned to me and said, "Watch this. I'm going to let him have it now." I should have looked out. He's got a knife. But Raymond's arm had already been cut open and his mouth slashed. The son lunged forward, but the other Arab had gotten up and gone around behind the other with the knife. We didn't dare move. They started backing off slowly without taking their eyes off of us, keeping us at bay with a knife. When they thought they were far enough away, they took off running as fast as they could while we stood there with motionless in the sun, and Raymond clutched his arm, dripping with blood. Masson immediately said that there was a doctor who spent his Sundays up on the plateau. Raymond wanted to go see him right away, but every time we tried to talk, the blood bubbled out of his mouth. We studied him and made our way back to the bungalow as quickly as we could. Once there, Raymond said that we were only flesh wounds and that we could make it to the doctors. He left with Masson, and I stayed to explain to the women what had happened. Madame Masson was crying, and Marie was very pale. I didn't like having to explain to them, so I just shut up, smoked a cigarette, and looked at the sea. Raymond came back with Masson about 1:30. His arm was bandaged up, and he had an adhesive plaster on the corner of his mouth. The doctor had told him that it was nothing, but Raymond looked pretty grim. Masson tried to make him laugh, but he still wouldn't say anything. Yeah, he's just all degraded and, he just lost a fight. Yeah, whatever. When he said he was going down to the beach, I asked him where he was going. He said he wanted to get some air. Masson and I said, "We'll go with you." But that made him angry, and he swore at us. Masson said not to argue with him. I followed him anyway. We walked on the beach for a long time. By now the sun was overpowering. It shattered into little pieces on the sand and water. I had the impression that Raymond knew where he was going, but I was probably wrong. At the far end of the beach, we finally came to a little spring running down through the sand between a large rock, and there we found our two Arabs. They were laying down in their greasy overalls. They seemed perfectly calm and almost content. Our coming changed nothing. The one who had attacked Raymond was looking at him without saying anything. The other one was blowing through a little reed over and over again, watching us through the corner of his eye. He kept on repeating the only three notes he could get out of his instrument. The whole time there was nothing but the sun and the silence, with the low gurgling from the spring and the three notes. Then Raymond put his hand in his pockets, but the others didn't move. They just kept looking at each other. I noticed the toes on the one playing the flute were tensed, but without taking his eyes off of his adversary, Raymond said, "Should I let him have it?" I thought that if I said no, he'd get himself all worked up and shoot me for sure. All I said was, "He hasn't said anything yet. It'd be pretty lousy to shoot him like that." You could still hear the sound of the water and the flute deep within the silence and the heat. Then Raymond said, "So I'll call him something, and when he answers back, I'll let him have it." I answered right. "But if he doesn't draw his knife, he can't shoot." Raymond started getting worked up. The other Arab went on playing, and he Both of them were watching every move Raymond made. No, I said to Raymond, take him on man to man and give me your gun. If the other one moves in or if he draws her knife, I'll let him have it. The sun glinted off of Raymond's gun and he handed it to me. Oh, God damn it. This part always gets to me. I'm sorry. That's Jesus. But we just stood there motionless as if everything was closing in around us. We stared at each other without blinking, and everything came to stop between the sea, the sand, and the sun, the double silence of the flute and the water. It was then that I realized that you could either shoot or not shoot. But all of a sudden, the Arabs, backing away, slipped behind the rocks, so Raymond and I turned and headed back the way we came. He seemed better and talked about it, the bus back. I went with him as far as the bungalow, and he climbed the wooden steps. I just stood there at the bottom, my head ringing from the sun, unable to face the effort it would take to climb the wooden staircase and face the women again. But the heat was so intense that it was just as bad standing still in the blinding stream of falling from the sky. To stare, to go, it amounted to the same thing. Should I stay? Oh, I said, now. This is actually, yeah, the source of that and The Stranger by The Cure. Yeah, Should I Stay or Should I Go is actually about this book. I told you in chapter 1 this book has inspired a lot of people. I wasn't making that up. But the heat was so intense that it just as bad standing still in the blinding stream falling from the sky to stare to go. It amounted to the same thing. A minute later, I turned back toward the beach and started walking. There was some dazzling red glare, the same. The sea gasped for air with each swallow, stifled a little wave that broke on the sand. I walked slowly toward the rocks, and I could feel my forehead swelling under the sun. All that heat was pressing down on me and making it hard for me to go on. Every time I felt a blast of it, hot breath just striking my face, I gritted my teeth, clenched my fists in my trouser pockets, and strained every nerve in order to overcome the sun and thick drunkenness it was spilling over me. With every blade of light that flashed off the sand from a bleached shell or piece of broken glass, my jaws tightened. I walked for a long time. For a distance, I could see the small, dark mass of rocks surrounding a blinding halo of light and sea spray. I was thinking of the cool spring right behind that rock. I wanted to hear the murmur of its water again, to escape the sun and the strain of the women's tears, to find shade and get rest again. But as I got closer, I saw that Raymond's man had come back. He was alone. He was laying on his back with his hands behind his head, his forehead in the shade of the rock, the rest of his body in the sun. His blue overalls seemed to be streaming in the heat. I was a little surprised. As far as I was concerned, the whole thing was over. I had gone there without even thinking about it. As soon as he saw me, he sat up a little and put his hand in his pocket. Naturally, I gripped Raymond's gun inside my jacket. Then he lay back again, but without taking his hand out of his pocket. It was pretty far away, about 10 meters or so. I could tell he was glancing at me now and then through his half-closed eyes, but most of the time he was just a form shimmering before my eyes in the fiery air. The sound of the waves was even lazier, more drawn out than at noon. It was the same sun, the same light that was still shining on the same sand as before. For 2 hours the day had stood still. For 2 hours it had been anchored in a sea of molten lead. On the horizon a tiny steamer went by, and I made out the black dot from the corner of my eye because I hadn't stopped watching the air. It occurred to me that all I had to do was turn around, and that would be the end of it. But the whole beach, throbbing in the sun, was pressing on my back. I took a few steps towards the spring. The Arab didn't move. Besides, he was still pretty far away. I mean, maybe it was the shadows on his face, but it looked like he was laughing. I waited. The sun was starting to burn my cheeks, and I could feel the drops of sweat gathering in my eyebrows. The sun was the same as it had been the day I buried Maman, and like then, my forehead especially was hurting me. All the veins in it throbbing under the skin. It was this burning, which I couldn't stand anymore, that made me move forward. I knew that it was stupid. I wouldn't get the sun off me by stepping forward, but I took one step forward, And this time, without getting up, the Arab drew his knife and held it up to me in the sun. The light shot off the steel, and it was like a long, flashing blade cutting my forehead. At the same instant, the sweat in my eyebrows dripped down over my eyelids and at once covered them with a warm, thick film. My eyes were blinded behind a curtain of tears and salt. All I could feel were the symbols of sunlight crashing on my forehead, and indistinctly the dazzling spear flying up from the knife in front of me. The scorching blade slashed at my eyelids and stabbed at my stinging eyes. That's when everything began to reel. The sea carried up a thick, fiery breath. It seemed to me as if the sky split open from one end to the other and to rain down fire. My whole being tensed, and I squeezed my hand around the revolver. The trigger gave. I felt the smooth underside of the butt, and there, in that noise, sharp and deafening at the same time, it was where it all started. I shook off the sweat and sun. I knew that I had shattered the harmony of the day, the exceptional silence of a beach where I'd been happy. Then I fired 4 more times at the motionless body, where the bullets lodged without leaving a trace. And it was like knocking 4 quick times on the door of unhappiness. Why did he hesitate? The man was already dead. He should have just emptied. I'm going to get removed from YouTube. He should have emptied the entire magazine. I don't know what the hell he was thinking, but here in America, you don't stop. You don't hesitate between shot 1 and shot 2. If you're defending yourself, you go through the entire damn magazine just like a cop would, or else that little moment of hesitation is going to be what part 2 of this fucking book is about, and you're going to have to live through that. You want to be in a prison in Algiers because you hesitated? Why did you even hesitate? Why did you do it in the first place? Guess we'll find out in the second half of The Stranger by Albert Camus. Pulitzer Prize winning novel from 1957. Thank you for taking a little bit out of your time out of your day to stare into the void. And I'll remind you, as Nietzsche was once famously penned, beware those that stare into the void. The void also stares back into you.